Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Saving Our Sons, Raising Black Children in a Turbulent World by Marita Golden. Foreword by Nathan McCall. Afterword by M.J. Fiev. Narrated by Lisa Reneé Pitts. The strongest lesson I can teach my son is the same lesson I teach my daughter: how to be who he wishes to be for himself. And this means how to move to that voice from within himself, rather than to those raucous, persuasive, or threatening voices from outside, pressuring him to be what the world wants him to be. Audre Lorde. No black mother grows up in this city or any city without fearing for her son. No black mother doesn't fear. I don't think a black person can get away from it. Sylvia Snowden, mother of Malik Butler, who was murdered on a Washington, D.C. street corner. Foreword. I met Marita Golden years ago when I was a reporter for the Washington Post. At the time, I was learning my way around Washington, D.C. Marita moved among a flourishing group of black writers in the city. In our encounters at cultural events around town and through reading her work, I saw Marita's passion for exploring the human condition, not only as a writer, but also as a world citizen. I had been a fan of Marita's work since reading her first book, Migrations of the Heart. It was a searing account of her marriage to a Nigerian man and her subsequent relocation with him to the motherland. In her 4 years living in Nigeria, she birthed a son and grew to appreciate an experience that most African Americans only dream of: living in a nation where blackness is the norm. In Migrations of the Heart, Marita also chronicled the cultural and gender-related clashes with her husband that ultimately doomed her marriage and drove her to return to the United States. It was apparent from Migrations and the books that followed that Marita's work as an artist reflects a drive to examine issues and seek answers to some of Black Americans' most pressing concerns. So it came as no surprise when her focus landed on her young son who, as a young black male, inherited the dubious distinction of being labeled an endangered species in America. This book, Saving Our Sons, Raising Black Children in a Turbulent World, is the story of how Marita, then a single mother, set out with a fierce determination to raise an African-American boy in a country hostile to his very existence. There is an obvious irony that made Saving Our Sons seem like an extension of Migrations of the Heart. Marita was struck by the fact that in Nigerian society, sons are held in high esteem. In America, however, the opposite is true. Black males are generally devalued and often treated as cogs in a nefarious school-to-prison pipeline, where sizable headcounts bring vast profits on the New York Stock Exchange. Year after year, the data about black boys' prospects in life yields distressing news. Black boys are more likely than their white peers to be expelled from school. Black boys are more likely than others to be committed to detention centers for juvenile infractions. Homicide is a leading cause of death among black males under the age of 21. Marita, faced with such a daunting reality, squarely confronted the probabilities of what might happen if she failed to help her son, Michael, navigate the pitfalls that awaited him, not only in the mean streets, but also in virtually every white-run institution that he would encounter over the years as he tried to find his way in America. For me, as a black man, saving our sons resonated in ways that are deeply personal. In a sense, I represent the embodiment of the nightmare that Marita hoped to avert in raising her son. I wrote about my journey in my autobiography, Makes Me Wanna Holler, a young black man in America. I chronicled my passage from being a smart kid in elementary school to a corner boy by the time I reached junior high. Before all was said and done, I had shot a man in the chest at point-blank range and later committed an armed robbery that resulted in a 12-year prison sentence. As Marita noted in Saving Our Sons, such tragedies don't exist in a vacuum. They impact entire families and often sweep like cyclones through whole communities. I eventually managed to recover from my travails, but not before inflicting a great deal of collateral pain on my family and on others. Saving Our Sons resonated with me for another reason as well. In Marita's story, I came to better understand my own mother's anguished attempts to save me from the streets, from the system, and from myself. For all her maternal love and effort, my mom lacked the skills and vocabulary to forge the tough, often awkward conversations between parents and children that are so vital. Conversely, Marita forced herself to push beyond her comfort zone and engaged her son in discussions that challenged distorted schoolyard notions about sex, violence, manhood, and more that competed for space in his head. Additionally, she sought the help of experts and regular people whose lived experiences might offer critical insights on black boys. And she enlisted the aid of the proverbial village, people in her community who could help reinforce positive images and messages. Saving Our Sons is not some sterile account from an academic theorizing from the relative safety of the ivory tower. This is a deeply passionate account from a black woman reporting from the front lines of a struggle that strikes at the very heart of black survival. In this book, Marita reminds us why every black parent should be vigilant and intentional in considering how to steer young black boys, and girls as well, through the precarious passage to adulthood. Saving Our Sons is disturbingly relevant in this, the 21st century. It's a compelling read. Nathan McCall, author of Makes Me Wanna Holler, a young black man in America. Author's Preface. I remember it like it was yesterday. The evening my son Michael, then in junior high school, asked the question that inspired this book. Why would God let that happen? He asked me, trying to hold back tears as he told me that a friend from his school had been shot and killed as he left a party. He was 13 years old. This was the second friend he had lost to gun violence. It was 1993. Some black mother's son in this year of our Lord 2022 is asking the same question. I wrote Saving Our Sons not because I thought I could answer my son's question, but because I loved him, and words were the only tools I had to fashion a response to one of the most universal questions. Why do terrible things happen? My son was growing up against the backdrop of the most violent years of the war on drugs, which we now know, and knew even then, was a war on black communities, a time when it was easier for a young black boy in many communities to sell drugs than graduate from high school. And even if he did graduate, he would look around and see his urban community filled with more cops than jobs, more abandoned buildings than recreation centers or safe, affordable housing. bereft of the amenities that foster community, parks, grocery stores, health care. Black communities were defunded of hope. Sound familiar? I wrote Saving Our Sons to grieve the carnage along with my community. Back then, an average of 400 mostly young black men a year were killing each other in major cities like the one I lived in Washington, D.C. I wrote Saving Our Sons to connect with the chorus of concern, wisdom, and compassion that I knew still had a heartbeat where black people lived, loved, and yes, died. I wrote Saving Our Sons to lift the voices of young black men who had become, to many Americans, black and white, anonymous statistics, part of a numbing daily death toll. I wanted to beat the drum that heralded life in the face of death. And I wanted to create a space where we could hear the voices of the mothers, fathers, teachers, mentors, sisters, and brothers of the black boys we wanted to save, and the writers and activists working to create a world where they would be safe. I was gratified and felt vindicated by the response to this book, which became a bestseller and staple of book clubs and university classes. In telling the story of my determination to save my son and enfolding it within the larger vision and hopes and dreams of others, I created and found community and offered community to others. I write this introduction nearly 30 years later when the death of one black man, George Floyd, reminded America how fraudulent our assertions of progress were. I write this as the names of Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice haunt us, and so many others gird us daily to fight police violence and murder. I write this nearly 30 years later when we now know how little difference a black president makes in the quest to make America the America of its vaulted mythology. While writing this book, I recall wondering how I could write a book that would be relevant, that decades later audiences would find themselves in and be transformed by. And so, I filled this book with as much love and as many fully realized people and voices, and asked as many tough, sometimes unanswerable, even unfathomable questions as I could. I wasn't writing to be nice. I was willing to leave blood on the page. This is the story of how I loved and raised and tried to make my black son strong and sensitive and keep him safe. I fell down, often, but I got up. We fell down, often, but we got up. This is not a how-to book. Rather, it is a How I Did One of the Hardest Things You Can Ever Try to Do book. And with faith in yourself and the support of family and community and luck, do it well. Jesse Jackson urged us to keep hope alive. Every parent who loves their child or children knows those words as prayer, mantra, and instruction. You cannot raise a black child in America and not be an optimist, no matter what. We have to save our sons and our daughters at a time when old-school systemic racism is now shaped and enhanced by climate change, artificial intelligence, social media turbulence, and the relentless replay of Black death at the hands of cops videos, and a new outburst of white backlash. In 1969, Gil Scott-Heron sang that while people had no food to eat on Earth, whitey's on the moon. Now the destination is Mars. Still and yet, We have to raise sons and daughters who will not be the meek inheriting the earth. We will fight for them all. We will raise them to fight for their place in the sun. They are our wealth. They are our future. We have always known our Black children's lives mattered. Calling my name. At a corner table in an upscale restaurant, heavy on redwood paneling, scented candles, and a retro 60s atmosphere, Elaine Ellis Comegys and I sat talking about sons. I was a visiting writer in residence at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where Elaine is an associate dean of students. At noon, we had set out, walking leisurely from the nearby campus to this restaurant located in downtown, an area that is really no more than a 5-block strip of retailers, which include a gourmet carryout place, a health food store, an art supply shop, a children's bookstore, and the town's only theater. Yellow Springs possesses a vaguely aging counterculture feel, and the town invoked in me fond memories of a time when my afro hair was several inches thicker than the close, conservative natural I wore that day. Ebullient and warm, Elaine had given me a capsule history of Yellow Springs. Population 4,000, including its status as a stop on the Underground Railroad. In May 1993, the town was bucolic, lovely, and so safe that unlocked doors along the wide tree-lined, shaded streets were common. The most serious recent crime wave anyone could remember was one spawned by a serial bicycle thief. Psychologically, I was a long way from Washington, D.C., where I returned each Thursday evening to spend the weekend with my family. I would be spending a month at Antioch, teaching a workshop on autobiographical writing, and so during lunch that day, I gently grilled Elaine, in a sister-to-sister on a white campus way, to tell me everything she knew that I should know, too. Over Elaine's pasta and my fish, we dredged up academic anecdotes. We had both spent much of our professional lives on historically white campuses, and so the revelations and head-shaking lasted a while. But by the time we ordered dessert, we were talking about sons, ours and everyone else's. Elaine and I landed on the gritty shore of this topic, any resistance to it capsized by its inescapable pull on our emotions. For at that moment, it was the fate and the crisis of our sons that obsessed and engaged us. Whether we were talking about the schools, a drive-by shooting, the economy, rap music, or the Knicks versus the Bullets, we were really talking about our sons. We talked about them because if we had not yet lost them, we feared we would. And looking into each other's eyes, hearing the confusion in our own voices, we wondered who could tell us how to get them back. Elaine recounted an incident involving a Black writer we both knew, whose son was driving home one evening in their affluent, mostly white neighborhood outside New York City. Shortly before reaching home, the young man was stopped by 2 white policemen who had been following him and had signaled for him to pull over. When he stopped his car and the policemen approached him, they grilled the young man as to why he was in the neighborhood. His assertion that he lived 6 houses down the block was greeted with disbelief, brutal laughter, and threatened physical punishment. Then they ordered him out of the car and handcuffed him. In the process of roughing him up, the policeman injured the nerves in the fingers of the young man's right hand so badly that he suffered permanent damage. He only escaped arrest when his younger brother, studying in the living room, noticed the reflection of the twirling red lights on the picture window of their house. He then went outside to investigate and found his brother being held down against the hood of a police car by the two cops, still insisting that he was simply on his way home. Only when the young man's parents came to the scene was he released. She was devastated, as you can imagine. Elaine concluded with a weary sigh, stirring her coffee. Her gaze, like mine, which was reflected in her glasses, was confounded. And when we talked a few days after it happened, she kept asking over and over, "How could this happen to my son?" There was no label on him certifying that he was educated, middle class, not a dangerous, bad nigger, I said, the Rodney King tape flashing quick and painful through my brain. And who knows, that probably would not have even mattered. His skin, that's the only label they saw. Then I began an account of the day a group of boys with guns entered my son's junior high school and methodically searched classrooms looking for a boy with whom they wanted to permanently settle a score. My voice tensed at the memory of how calmly my son told my husband Joe and me of the incident over dinner. How proudly Michael detailed his early departure by a side entrance to avoid a stray bullet, or the impending fight rumored to be scheduled for the park outside the school that afternoon. How did it get so bad? I asked Elaine wistfully. What happened? How did we become the enemy, too? We sat there, two educated, articulate women who prided themselves on their ability to navigate the tightrope stretched between the black and the white worlds. Now that the talk of sons had started, we recounted one incident after another. The son of a friend caught in crossfire. The son of a cousin doing time in jail for selling drugs. Yet for all the verbiage exchanged that afternoon, we were unable to explain how we had arrived in this season of blood and ashes. That was the spring I decided I would remove my son from public school in Washington, D.C., and enroll him in a private boarding school outside Philadelphia, as much to save his life as to buy him a good education. And after a lifetime spent in the inner city, my husband was suddenly willing to look at houses in the suburbs when we decided we needed more space. Drug traffic, once banished from our street by a combination of neighborhood vigilance and police cooperation, had returned. My car was broken into and the radio stolen. We lived 5 blocks from Howard University, 2 blocks from the now boarded-up Howard Theater, once a mecca for black stars from Duke Ellington in the 30s to James Brown in the 60s. Now addicts and prostitutes congregated all day before the grim, battered shell that was all that remained of the theater. And 2 weeks before my residency at Antioch began, a murderer, dubbed the Shotgun Stalker, who had randomly killed 4 people in a neighborhood a mile from where we lived, was captured in a parking lot 3 blocks from our house. That afternoon, as Elaine and I sipped our herbal tea and nibbled our chocolate mousse, and after we paid the bill and walked slowly, almost reluctantly, back to campus, homicide was the leading cause of death for young black males. That reality sat, a visible, intruding ghost, in the restaurant with us, strolled along the clean, neat streets of Yellow Springs, lay in wait for us in our campus offices. That statistic, like so much else in black life, is surrealistic, chilling, and outrageous. Somewhere between the fact that black males are the prime victims of crime and violence and the false media-generated image that they are responsible as well for nearly all the crime in America lies the truth. But where and how do you find it? As the mother of a black son, I have raised my child with a trembling hand that clutches and leads. I am no slave mother, my sleep plundered by images of the auction block. I dream instead of my son slaying the statistics that threaten to ensnare and cripple him, statistics that I know are a commentary on the odds for my son, who isn't dead or in jail. And though I have paved a straight and narrow path for my son to tread, always there is the fear that he will make a fatal detour, be seduced, or be hijacked by a white or a black cop, or a young black predator, or a Nazi skinhead, or his own bad judgment, or a weakness that even I, as his mother, cannot love or punish or will out of him. And yet I say defiantly, they are all my sons. The young prodigals, as well as the boys who keep the faith of black mothers and fathers. Over dinner a few weeks earlier, my friend Deborah had described her new job as head of public relations for one of the largest hospitals in Washington. As part of her training, she had spent an evening in MedStar, the hospital's nationally known trauma unit. She was clearly shaken as she recalled. The evening I spent in the trauma unit was hell. I felt so bad watching them bring in one black male after another, shot in the arm, wounded in the chest. I watched them use electrodes to try to get their hearts going again. It's as if everything I'd read in the papers meant nothing until I was in that room to see it up close. Patty, a TV producer, shifted in her chair next to Deborah and pronounced, with more precision and honesty than I could bear, "I've got a 6-year-old boy, and I feel like I'm raising a target." I am too smart and too skeptical to believe all the hype. I know that it is only a small percentage of males in the black community who have planted this terror we feel. But no matter how I add the numbers and take the pulse of my neighbors and friends, I know that African Americans inhabit a literal and figurative space unlike anything in our previous experience. At a party one night, a journalist friend proudly said, "Look at all those white kids who get drunk and speed to their deaths in the suburbs, or their fathers who wake up one morning and shoot the whole family. We've no monopoly on violence." Maybe not, but proportionately, we've got a monopoly on death. I nearly screamed at him. My husband is a high school teacher in Washington. How many teachers in Chevy Chase or Montgomery County can say, like him, that over a dozen students they've taught have been killed? I was suddenly too weary to talk to my friend about the emotional toll of all this on my husband and his fellow teachers, as well as on their students, who had witnessed kids snuffed out literally before their eyes. I have used language to decipher and overcome politically and culturally imposed madness. I have used words to claim sporadic cherished moments of beauty, real and imagined. And because all black boys, the ones on the 6 o'clock news in handcuffs and the ones singing in the church choir, are my sons, the sons of my community and the sons of America, I began searching for them that spring. I looked for our sons with a hunger that took root when my father first told me about my ancestors who built kingdoms and survived cotton fields. On the day my own son was born, and when the black-on-black violence began in earnest. Maybe, I thought, if I write long and hard and strongly and bravely enough, I can save and protect my son and somehow bless the others. This moment, when intraracial violence and death undermine any possibility for progress.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?